In recent weeks, a public exchange between Oprah Winfrey, the influential media personality and philanthropist, and former President Donald Trump has drawn significant attention and sparked widespread debate. The interaction centers on Oprah's vocal criticism of current environmental policies, to which Trump responded with a series of remarks that many consider to be racially charged and dismissive. This report seeks to examine the incident thoroughly, exploring the origins of the exchange, the substance of the environmental policy concerns raised, and the implications of the remarks made by Trump. Oprah Winfrey's environmental advocacy. Oprah Winfrey has long been recognized not only for her contributions to media, but also for her philanthropic efforts and advocacy on various social issues. Recently, she has increasingly focused on environmental concerns, emphasizing the urgency of addressing climate change and sustainable development. During a televised interview in early June 2025, Oprah expressed her dissatisfaction with the administration's handling of environmental regulations. She criticized the rollback of certain protections and questioned the commitment to international agreements aimed at reducing carbon emissions. Donald Trump's response. Shortly after Oprah's public statements, Donald Trump took to social media and later made remarks during a rally dismissing her criticisms. Notably, he accused Oprah of benefiting from racial quotas rather than merit, suggesting her prominence was not earned but rather a product of affirmative action policies. The specific phrase used, "You're only here because of black quotas," sparked immediate backlash from various sectors, including civil rights groups, political commentators, and members of the media. This statement was widely interpreted as an attempt to undermine Oprah's credibility through racial insinuation. The broader political climate. This incident occurred within a broader context of increasing polarization in U.S. politics, where discussions around race, equity, and environmental policy have become particularly contentious. The debate over environmental policy itself remains divided, with contrasting views on the balance between economic growth and ecological responsibility. Moreover, the role of race in public discourse continues to provoke strong reactions, especially when linked to accusations of preferential treatment or quotas. Understanding this background is essential to grasp the full impact and significance of the Trump-Oprah exchange. Oprah Winfrey's emergence as an outspoken advocate for environmental sustainability marks a notable expansion of her public platform. Historically focused on social justice and educational issues, her recent emphasis on climate change and environmental policies reflects growing public concern and the increasing urgency of the global climate crisis. Key points of Oprah's environmental critique. In the interview that sparked the controversy, Oprah highlighted several areas of concern regarding current environmental policy in the United States. Rollback of environmental protections. Oprah criticized the administration's decision to weaken regulations on air and water pollution. She argued that these rollbacks endanger public health and contribute to worsening environmental degradation. Withdrawal from international agreements. She expressed disappointment over the U.S. scaling back commitments to international accords, such as the Paris Agreement, emphasizing the importance of global cooperation to effectively address climate change. Investment in renewable energy. Oprah called for increased federal investment in renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power, to reduce dependency on fossil fuels and promote sustainable economic growth. Environmental justice. She drew attention to the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on marginalized communities, advocating for policies that address environmental inequities. Public reception and media coverage. Oprah's statements received mixed responses from the public and media outlets. Environmental advocacy groups praised her for bringing attention to critical issues, while some conservative commentators accused her of lacking expertise and pushing a politically motivated agenda. Her position resonated with a significant portion of the population concerned about climate change and the sustainability of natural resources, underscoring her influence as a media figure capable of shaping public discourse. The political environment surrounding environmental policy. At the time of Oprah's remarks, environmental policy remained a polarizing subject in American politics. The debate often centered on balancing environmental protection with economic interests, particularly in energy-producing regions. The administration, led by Donald Trump, prioritized deregulation and support for traditional energy sectors, arguing that such policies fostered job creation and economic growth. This approach often conflicted with environmental advocates who emphasized the long-term risks of climate change and the need for a transition to cleaner energy. Following Oprah Winfrey's pointed critique of environmental policy, former President Donald Trump's reaction rapidly escalated the controversy into a public and politically charged confrontation. Trump's initial social media remarks in the hours after Oprah's televised interview aired Trump posted a series of messages on his social media platform. His posts dismissed her environmental concerns as uninformed and framed them as politically motivated attacks against his administration's agenda. One message in particular stood out, accusing Oprah of benefiting from black quotas, a term often used pejoratively to question the legitimacy of affirmative action and racial diversity initiatives. The rally comments during a rally held a few days later, Trump expanded on his criticism. Addressing the crowd, he said, "Success isn't because of her talent or hard work. She's only here because of black quotas. That's why she feels entitled to lecture us on our policies." This statement drew immediate reactions, as it linked Oprah's professional achievements directly to race-based advantages, thereby undermining her credibility and merit. Public and political reaction, the comment was widely condemned by civil rights organizations and political leaders across the spectrum. Many viewed it as an inflammatory racial attack, inappropriate from a former president and damaging to public discourse. At the same time, some supporters of Trump defended his remarks, arguing that he was merely highlighting the role of affirmative action policies in questioning Oprah's qualifications to comment on political matters. The use of black quotas in political discourse, the phrase black quotas refers to affirmative action or diversity policies intended to increase representation of black individuals in education, employment, and other areas. While supporters view these policies as necessary to address systemic inequities, critics often frame them as reverse discrimination or undermining meritocracy. Trump's invocation of this term in the context of Oprah's success injected a racial element into the policy debate, intensifying existing tensions around race, privilege, and achievement in the United States. To fully understand the implications of Donald Trump's reference to black quotas in his remarks about Oprah Winfrey, it is essential to examine the history and ongoing debates surrounding affirmative action policies in the United States. Origins and purpose of affirmative action policies were introduced in the 1960s as part of broader civil rights efforts to address systemic discrimination and promote equal opportunity for historically marginalized groups, particularly African Americans. The goals were to increase access to education, employment, and government contracting through proactive measures, including targeted recruitment, consideration of race in admissions or hiring, and, in some cases, set-asides or quotas versus holistic consideration. While the term quotas is often used colloquially to describe these policies, the use of strict quotas fixed numerical requirements for minority representation has been legally challenged and largely disallowed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Instead, courts have generally permitted holistic approaches where race may be one of multiple factors considered to foster diversity and redress past discrimination. Legal challenges and Supreme Court decisions. The U.S. Supreme Court has played a central role in defining the limits of affirmative action in Regents of the University of California v. Back 1978. The court ruled that strict racial quotas were unconstitutional but allowed race to be considered as one factor in admissions. Subsequent decisions have maintained this nuanced stance, balancing the promotion of diversity with equal protection principles. Recent cases have revisited these policies, reflecting shifting judicial attitudes and political climates. Public opinion and political polarization. Affirmative action remains a deeply divisive issue in American society. Supporters argue that such policies are necessary to overcome entrenched inequalities and to promote diverse environments that benefit all. Opponents contend that they can result in unfair advantages based on race, harm meritocracy, and perpetuate division. Political discourse frequently invokes affirmative action as a symbol of broader debates over race, privilege, and identity, often with significant emotional and cultural charge. The context of Trump's remarks. In invoking black quotas, Donald Trump tapped into this contentious debate. His phrasing suggested that Oprah's success owed more to these policies than personal merit, thereby questioning both her qualifications and the legitimacy of affirmative action itself. This framing intensified the racial dimension of the dispute, transforming what began as a policy disagreement over environmental issues into a broader confrontation about race, achievement, and social justice in America. The public exchange between Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump quickly became a focal point in national media and social discourse, prompting a range of reactions from journalists, commentators, advocacy groups, and the general public. Media framing of the incident. Major news outlets framed the incident through varied lenses, reflecting their editorial stances and audience expectations. Mainstream and progressive media, many outlets emphasize the racial undertones of Trump's comments, portraying them as an inflammatory and divisive attack that sought to delegitimize Oprah's accomplishments by reducing them to racial quotas. Coverage often included expert analysis on the implications of such rhetoric for race relations and public discourse. Conservative media. Some conservative platforms defended Trump's right to critique affirmative action policies, framing his remarks as a challenge to perceived political correctness. Certain commentators argued that Oprah's environmental positions were outside her expertise, and that Trump's response was a pushback against elitism. Social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and other networks became battlegrounds for heated debate. Hashtags both supporting and condemning Trump trended, illustrating the polarized nature of public opinion. Public opinion polls conducted in the aftermath indicated a deeply divided public. A majority viewed Trump's remarks as inappropriate and racially insensitive. However, a significant minority agreed with his criticism of affirmative action, seeing it as an unfair advantage that undermines meritocracy. Oprah's Quotas' environmental stance was generally well received among younger and more progressive demographics, but met skepticism or hostility from more conservative segments. Reactions. From civil rights and advocacy groups, several organizations issued formal statements condemning Trump's language. The NAACP described the comments as a regression in the fight for racial equality and respect. The Urban League called for a national dialogue on the role of race in politics and media. Environmental advocacy groups reaffirmed support for Oprah's environmental concerns, calling attention to the urgency of the climate crisis. Celebrity and public figures' responses. Other public figures weighed in, some defending Oprah's legacy and critiquing Trump's rhetoric, while others echoed his skepticism of affirmative action policies. This incident underscored the continuing centrality of race and identity politics in American public life, demonstrating how a policy debate can quickly become a flashpoint for broader social tensions. The confrontation between Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump, while rooted in environmental policy criticism, had significant ramifications for how environmental issues are discussed and perceived in the broader public sphere. Environmental policy discourse in a polarized context. The incident highlighted the challenges of advancing environmental policy debates in a highly polarized political environment where issues quickly become entangled with identity politics and personal attacks. Oprah's substantive concerns about environmental regulation and climate action risked being overshadowed by the racialized rhetoric that followed, diverting attention from policy specifics to cultural and social conflicts. Effect on public engagement for some segments of the population. Trump's dismissive and racially charged comments may have reinforced skepticism toward environmental activism, framing it as elitist or politically motivated. Conversely, the backlash against Trump's remarks energized environmental advocates and progressives who saw the episode as a call to deepen public education and engagement on climate issues, particularly in communities disproportionately affected by environmental degradation. Political calculations and strategy. Politicians and parties on both sides adjusted their messaging in response to the controversy. Environmental proponents sought to decouple climate advocacy from racial and identity debates to broaden appeal. Opponents of stricter environmental policies leveraged the controversy to question the credibility of prominent advocates and paint environmental regulation as a partisan issue. Media's role in shaping the debate. Intense media focus on the personal and racial aspects of the conflict may have contributed to a fragmented public understanding of the environmental policy challenges at stake. Complex scientific and policy matters often require nuanced discussion, which is difficult to maintain amid sensational headlines and social media. Amplification of conflict. Long-term implications. This episode serves as a case study in how race and identity politics intersect with policy debates in the United States, with potential consequences for future efforts to address environmental and other critical issues. Navigating these dynamics will be essential for policymakers, advocates, and communicators seeking to build consensus and implement effective environmental solutions. The public feud between Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump prompted varied reactions from political leaders, governmental institutions, and advocacy organizations, highlighting the complex interplay of race, politics, and policy. Statements from political leaders. Democratic leaders. Several prominent Democrats condemned Trump's remarks as racially insensitive and inappropriate for a public figure. They reaffirmed support for affirmative action and emphasized the importance of addressing systemic inequalities. Some used the occasion to call for renewed focus on environmental policies and climate action. Republican leaders. The Republican response was more divided. While some echoed Trump's criticism of affirmative action, arguing for merit-based systems, others distanced themselves from his language, expressing concern about the potential for divisive rhetoric to alienate voters and distract from policy goals. Institutional reactions. Environmental agencies. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and other federal bodies refrained from direct commentary on the controversy, but reiterated their commitment to advancing environmental protections, consistent with existing policy frameworks. Civil rights organizations, groups such as the NAACP and the Southern Poverty Law Center, issued statements condemning the racial undertones of the controversy and called for respect and civility in public discourse. Media, regulatory bodies, some media watchdog organizations, highlighted the importance of balanced coverage and cautioned against sensationalism that could inflame social divisions. Congressional inquiries and discussions. While no formal congressional hearings were initiated specifically related to this incident, the exchange intensified discussions in legislative committees about the role of race in policymaking, affirmative action programs, and the politics of environmental legislation. Impact on policymaking and partisan dynamics. The controversy contributed to the existing partisan divide on environmental legislation and civil rights policies. Efforts to advance comprehensive environmental reforms faced heightened scrutiny and political maneuvering as parties sought to leverage the incident for political gain. The public confrontation between Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump quickly escalated on social media platforms, becoming a viral topic that engaged millions and spurred grassroots activism on multiple fronts. Social media amplification. Hashtag campaigns. Both supporters and critics created trending #ProOprah campaigns emphasized #RespectOprah and #environmental justice, while Trump supporters rallied behind hashtags such as #AffirmativeActionDebate and #free speech. Misinformation and polarization. Social media also became a vector for misinformation, with some users spreading false claims about both Oprah's environmental record and the nature of affirmative action policies. This contributed to increased polarization and hindered constructive dialogue. Influencer and celebrity engagement. Numerous influencers and celebrities used their platforms to weigh in, further amplifying the controversy and mobilizing their followers. Grassroots movements and advocacy. Environmental activism. The episode galvanized environmental groups, many of whom launched renewed campaigns emphasizing the intersection of environmental justice and racial equity. Initiatives targeted policymakers and sought to increase voter engagement on climate issues. Civil rights advocacy. Organizations advocating for racial justice intensified efforts to combat racist rhetoric and educate the public about affirmative action and systemic inequality. Workshops, online forums, and community events were organized to foster understanding and solidarity. Counter-movements. On the other side, grassroots groups skeptical of affirmative action and critical of mainstream environmental policies organized rallies and online discussions advocating for policy reform and merit-based approaches. Challenges and opportunities. The social media storm surrounding the Trump-Oprah controversy illustrated the power of digital platforms to shape public discourse, but also highlighted challenges in fostering nuanced, respectful conversations amid heated social and political divides. Grassroots activists face the ongoing task of leveraging social media's reach while combating misinformation and promoting inclusive dialogue. The public clash between Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump not only spotlighted social and political divisions, but also raised important questions about the legal and ethical frameworks governing race-based policies and the conduct of public figures in discourse. Legal foundations of affirmative action policies are grounded in a series of federal and state laws, as well as court decisions, designed to combat discrimination and promote equal opportunity. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Executive orders and agency guidelines have established affirmative action programs in federal hiring and contracting. Judicial scrutiny balances the aim of remedying past discrimination with constitutional protections, such as equal protection under the law, free speech, and limits on public commentary. Public figures, including politicians and media personalities, operate within broad free speech protections. However, ethical considerations demand responsible use of that freedom, especially regarding potentially harmful or divisive statements, defamation, and hate speech. While Trump's remarks were widely criticized, they generally fell short of legal definitions of defamation or hate speech, which are narrowly defined under U.S. law. Public accountability. Political and social norms hold public figures accountable through media scrutiny, public opinion, and political consequences. Ethical considerations in public discourse. The use of racialized language to undermine an individual's credibility raises ethical concerns about respect, fairness, and social cohesion. Responsible discourse requires separating legitimate policy critique from ad hominem, attacks, or racial innuendo. Media organizations and platforms also bear responsibility for promoting balanced coverage and mitigating inflammatory rhetoric. Policy implications and future directions. This controversy underscores the need for clear guidelines and ethical standards in political communication. Alongside ongoing legal evaluation of race-based policies, balancing the pursuit of social justice with principles of merit and equality remains a complex legal and ethical challenge for policymakers and society. The public confrontation between Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump centered on environmental policy, criticism, and racialized rhetoric offers a revealing case study of the complexities inherent in contemporary American political and social discourse. Summary of key findings: Oprah Winfrey's environmental advocacy reflects growing public concern about climate change and environmental justice. Highlighting the intersection of ecological and social issues, Donald Trump's response, invoking Black quotas, introduced a racialized dimension that shifted the focus from policy critique to identity politics and personal attacks. The controversy exposed deep divisions in public opinion on affirmative action, race, and environmental policy, illustrating the challenges of constructive dialogue in a polarized context. Media coverage and social media amplified the dispute, fueling both engagement and misinformation, while grassroots movements mobilized in response. Legal and ethical considerations reveal the delicate balance between free speech, responsible public discourse, and the pursuit of social equity. Broader societal implications: this episode underscores the persistent influence of race and identity in shaping American political debates. Often complicating efforts to address substantive policy issues, it highlights the need for greater civility and responsibility among public figures in their rhetoric, enhanced public education on the complexities of race-based policies and environmental challenges, constructive dialogue that prioritizes facts and empathy over divisive language. Moving forward for environmental policy and social justice efforts to advance effectively, stakeholders must navigate the intertwined realities of policy, substance, and social context. This requires commitment from political leaders, media, civil society, and citizens to foster inclusive, informed, and respectful discourse. The Trump-Oprah controversy serves as a cautionary example and an impetus for reflection on how America can reconcile its diversity with shared goals for a sustainable and equitable future. If you found this investigation insightful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more in-depth reports. Hit the bell icon to get notified as soon as new videos drop. And please, leave a like. It really helps us keep delivering quality content. Thanks for watching.